Hello everyone, I'm Amarachi Ubani. Thanks for joining us this hour. You're watching The World Today. Here's what's coming up on the program. The U.S. House of Representatives passes bill that could lead to TikTok being removed from all U.S. app stores. Meanwhile, the U.S. announces a $133 million humanitarian aid for Haiti. In the last couple of hours, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill banning the social media app TikTok. There were 352 yeas, well exceeding the necessary 290 of the 435 House members. A bill would require the Chinese tech giant ByteDance to sell its stake in the app within 6 months or face a ban from U.S. app stores and web hosting platforms. It follows previous efforts by American authorities to limit access to the app, citing national security risks. TikTok claims to have 170 million U.S. users, which could mean that half the country's population has an account. The app succeeded its predecessor, Musical.ly, a social media platform where users would lip sync to a 15-second music clip. A Shanghai-based company was making big inroads in the U.S. and had a very young user base. By 2017, just 3 years after it was founded, it claimed over 60 million monthly active users. One of the co-sponsors of the bill is Wisconsin Republican Mike Gallagher, who says he hopes the Senate would receive the message and also pass the bill. We'll have more on this in a bit. In the meantime, U.S. Presidents Joe Biden and his Republican rival, Donald Trump, have both passed the delegate thresholds to clinch their party's nominations for the election in November. 4 states, 1 American territory, and Democrats living abroad held their primaries on Tuesday. The result means U.S. voters face a rematch of the 2020 presidential election in 8 months. The incumbent, citing positive economic trends, said that the U.S. is in the middle of a comeback, but faces challenges from those seeking to pass abortion restrictions and cut social programs. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has zeroed his campaign on stricter immigration laws, including a pledge to seal the border and implement record-setting deportations. Trump has also vowed to fight crime, boost domestic energy production, tax foreign imports, and end the war in Ukraine, resume an America First approach to global affairs. The nominations will be made official at party conventions in the summer. These are big stories in the United States. Speaking to our channel's TV correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird. Maria, let's begin with the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, better known as a TikTok bill. It's just passed in the House of Representatives. What does this mean for Americans who are already on the app?
Well, there are over 170 million Americans on the app, about 7 million businesses that are benefiting from the app. And so this would be, I think, a major devastation to many Americans who have become very much avid TikTok users. And so it is hopeful, obviously, by many Americans who there have been all types of commercials running about the benefits of TikTok for Americans and how it has really helped the economy since COVID. And so I think this is going to be something that will definitely receive some adverse comments and obviously some reactions from Americans who are vested within TikTok. But the Senate still has to approve this bill. But it has been stated that if the Senate does approve the bill, the president will sign it. And the White House is providing technical review of the bill. And so it is potentially likely that this could pass. But there are some senators that have definitely been clear that they are not going to vote for the bill to move forward.
Well, this is a tricky situation for lawmakers to be in, isn't it? For the senators who have to vote on this bill, even for the president. You're right. Millions of Americans are on this app, but they're making money from the app as well. But then the lawmakers are citing national security risk being posed by the app. Help us understand how this is a problem.
The national security issues are the ties that are believed between the TikTok parent company and also communist parties in China. And that's the concern. The concern is the tie to those communist parties that the U.S. Obviously has under watch and are potentially on the list for security watch and review by Americans. And so I think that's where we're seeing it. Really, this is calling for a divestment from the TikTok parent company. This is not necessarily calling for a ban, but it's obviously been perceived that it is unlikely that TikTok will divest in those Communist Party investment into those parties. And so that would then put the U.S. in a position within 6 months to be removing and banning TikTok from the use in the United States. But again, as many people have said as well, TikTok could decide to not allow the application to be used in the United States if we get to that point. And so this is a very tricky situation, obviously very politically driven, but one that could have very major effects on the American people. We also know the president recently started a TikTok channel, and the White House has been using it. So it's very interesting to see how these dynamics are playing out.
Yeah, and a lot of young people in the United States are also on TikTok, those who are young at heart as well. You mentioned the president. Stories are being told on TikTok. I mean, we've had some really interesting revelations on TikTok, just everyday life and people just living their lives and all of that. News and information as well being passed on TikTok. What do people make of this impending ban? How are they reacting to what the U.S. House of Representatives has voted on this afternoon?
Well, I think this has been something that many Americans knew could potentially be heading this way. There have been all types of commercials over the past few months showing how TikTok has impacted the lives of Americans, specifically those who have been using it for business. And so that, and as you said, the everyday life of the American being able to share stories through TikTok. And so this will obviously, many have also said this would give Facebook a greater advantage, and it would become a much larger giant within the space of social media in the United States. But I think that this is a major concern. This is one that Americans have definitely jumped onto as part of their everyday life. And so this would be a major change for the way in which the U.S. uses social media.
Are they also comparing themselves to perhaps India, where TikTok has been banned? Are they looking at, the impact it's had on how better society has become, or, how difficult it's been perhaps navigating social media?
Well, I think that there have been some, obviously, within the House and within the Senate and the White House, they've looked at those comparisons. I'm not sure if the everyday American has looked at those comparisons. I think that the everyday American is looking at how they use it. But to your point, the U.S. is obviously battling with quite a bit, whether it's foreign relations or even internally domestic relations as it relates to violence, and just being able to address some of the economic challenges. So those are all areas that are playing a part in the decision-making process. But I think it's most importantly is really what is driving this is the parent company of TikTok's investment and relationship with the Communist Party in China, which is really driving this potential ban of TikTok.
I'm sure that will be a bit difficult to prove, Maria. How possible will it be to ban the app in U.S. app stores? Because I think that's the target here, making sure that Americans who have to renew, subscriptions on, through the local app stores are not able to have access to it, and to ensure that they don't have access to it on web hosting platforms either.
Well, that's something that the U.S. will be working with Apple. Obviously, they'll be working with Google, all of the app stores to ban those. And I think it'll just be as simple as requiring those companies an order that will state that they are no longer able to provide that app as for purchase from their users. And that will begin, and it's going to be a 6-month approach to it. So I think that the U.S. will obviously have to deal with that. But I think the government and those who are in the process of putting this bill forth have thought through how they will be able to execute and being able to advise those companies of that.
How soon does the Senate have to vote on this bill?
Yes, the Senate will have to vote on this bill, and it will happen pretty quickly. I think we're going to know very soon. As you stated a few hours ago, last evening, is when the House passed it, and so it's now sitting at the Senate. And we're going to be heading toward recess and later in the spring, so we can likely see some movement over the next few weeks or sooner.
Wow. Let's talk U.S. politics now. That's a familiar terrain, isn't it? It's certain now that Biden and Trump will be going head-to-head in the November polls. No surprise here, Maria. Anyone observing U.S. politics already saw this coming. But this race will be different because it will be the second time that the two men will be squaring off at the polls. It's also the second time Americans will be deciding on two older candidates, Maria, probably the oldest we've ever seen in U.S. politics, where people have to decide between experience and popularity.
Yes, you're exactly correct. It will be experience versus popularity, but popularity is within the scope of those who are true Trump supporters. He has a band of individuals who even sit outside sometimes of the Republican Party ideologies. He has created a response from Americans who are not traditional voters. And I think that's where the Biden administration is a bit concerned, because he has woke up a part of America that traditionally was not a part of the electoral process, but now have become ever present in the process. And what we know is that these are individuals who typically are not as aware and as involved in local politics, are not as aware and involved as to larger issues that exist, but to your point of popularity, but have followed the rhetoric, the discussions, and what they perceive to be someone that speaks their language, speaks their what they believe in, and they are following behind the former president. And as you stated before, having two individuals of this age, this is unprecedented in the U.S. I think that does bring some Americans a bit of concern as to being able to carry out the duties of presidency in a way. But what we've seen, and I think where many Americans are becoming more comfortable with the Biden administration, is some of those individuals who are a little bit younger, those individuals who have experience, but will be able to carry the party forward. And it looks like the Republicans could be taking that same model and having those who are going to be a part of potentially what President Trump would be building, former President Trump would be building, putting something that reflects those younger, experienced individuals as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting for some Americans who a few years from now will think that probably the youngest American in modern history was Barack Obama. I know how that sounds. But looking ahead, both leaders going head-to-head in November, Trump has said he's open to presidential debates this time. Do you think that Biden is up for it?
Well, I think the current president, Biden, I think he would definitely have to be up for some sort of a debate. I think that there's still those that are in the middle that aren't sure where they would sit. I think that there are many Republicans that might not be totally sold on the former president, but I think that what we'll have to do is the debate would allow for them to make a very conscious decision. I think that we're going to begin to start seeing people cross party lines very quickly through this election cycle. We saw it the last election cycle, but I think because, to your point, we are seeing a second time around for both of these candidates going head to head and knowing there are some very serious and fundamental challenges that the U.S. is facing. And so being able to see who will be able to lead the U.S. For the next 4 years, I think is going to be paramount. So I think that we could potentially see a debate between the two of them.
Yeah, and the talking points this year, not very different from past elections. There are just a few meeting points. There's immigration, there's a cost of living crisis. Well, we've gone past COVID, but I don't know if that would ever come up, in the debates. But what do you think could change, in their talking points of the manifesto this year as we head towards November?
Well, I think that some of the talking points aren't going to change from the standpoint of money in Americans' pockets. I think that has been a conversation since COVID. I think since the last time they came head to head, and I think that's still a concern for Americans, is that being able to, as you mentioned, the cost of living has gone up, but you have not really seen the salaries for jobs going up. We've talked about how there are jobs available, but the service industry has not been able to reflect the salaries that will allow Americans to be able to live the average middle class life. We still continue to see the U.S. have a very stark difference between those who are getting richer and those who are in the underserved populations and who are continuing to be at poverty or below poverty level. And so the question is, who's going to be able to speak to the middle class and be able to ensure the middle class that they too will be able to see salary increases that will allow them to be able to live and be able to have a little extra money in their pocket. So you're starting to see the president talk about putting things in place to ensure Americans have a little extra money in their pocket to do more than just pay their bills.
Yeah, I think some Americans, it's some of the things they attribute to Trump, and they had a little extra in their pockets. A lot of people experienced bonuses during the Trump administration. Thank you again, Maria. In another development, the United States has announced an additional $133 million in humanitarian aid to Haiti. Meanwhile, residents of the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince, say the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry is a victory, an important step forward following the surge in gang violence in the country. The Prime Minister, in his resignation on Monday, said the country had seen an increase in acts of violence of all kinds perpetrated against the population: assassinations, attacks against law enforcement, looting, systematic destruction of public and private buildings. He said the government could not remain indifferent and called on Haitians to remain calm and do everything they can for peace and stability to come back as fast as possible. Other residents say the Henry's government has been quite supportive of these gangs. Well, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller indicated the need to achieve a free and fair election in Haiti, saying members are expected to be appointed within the next 24 to 48 hours, with steps to appoint an interim prime minister.
During the meeting, Secretary Blinken announced an additional $33 million in humanitarian assistance for the people of Haiti, as well as an additional $100 million for the multinational security support mission. These are important first steps to achieving free and fair elections and providing the peace and security the Haitian people deserve. Under the terms of the agreement that was announced yesterday, we expect that the members of the Transitional Council will be appointed in the next 24 to 48 hours, and then they will take the step to appoint an interim prime minister in the near future after that. Our expectation is that he would resign upon appointment of an interim prime minister. We have been urgently engaging with Congress. We've held 68 meetings with members of Congress and their staff to urge the release of additional funds to support this mission because we think it's urgent to the security. And we have been exploring ways to continue to deliver humanitarian assistance through other partners on the ground, UNICEF, the World Food Program. But right now, UNRWA plays a critical role in delivering humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians that no other agency is positioned to assume. Any detainee ought to be treated in compliance with international humanitarian law. That's what we have impressed upon the Israeli government. And we have seen the IDF come out and make statements to the same effect, to say that they are a professional military. They expect all of their soldiers to behave consistent with their rules of engagement, consistent with the laws of war. And if people make mistakes, they will be disciplined, and we will continue to impress upon them that that's our expectation. For any assault on Rafah proceeds, that the government of Israel needs to develop a plan to deal with the well more than 1 million Palestinians who are there, many of them displaced, and that they have a credible and implementable humanitarian assistance plan. And as of today, we have not yet seen such a plan.
In another development, the World Food Programme's country director in Haiti, Jean-Marie Bauer, says that rising hunger in the country, coupled with an increase in violence, has made things even more difficult for Haitians. He says Haiti depends on food imports from 50% of its food supply, and that has been complicated by the violence.
What's going on over the past few days has me very worried, and I'm ringing the alarm bell because you have this baseline level of hunger that's already very high, and this is worsening things even more. So what we're seeing is an increase in violence. We're seeing an increase in population displacement with 15,000 newly displaced people over the first weekend of March, bringing the total number of displaced people in Haiti to above 360,000. The main roads to Port-au-Prince are controlled by armed groups. The port was disrupted by armed groups last week and is still not operational. That means food can't come into Port-au-Prince by road or by sea. And of course, air service, flights to Port-au-Prince have been disrupted. They've also been disrupted to the rest of the country. That has me very worried because we know Haiti depends on food imports for 50% of its food supply. And we are seeing, WFP can confirm, that the cost of a food basket in Port-au-Prince is rising. It's also rising elsewhere in Haiti. And this is a huge problem for the population. WFP is still in the country. We have 300 people in Haiti doing everything we possibly can to support the population. I want to give a shout out to my team in Port-au-Prince who are in place, making sure that we're providing hot meals to the displaced population. We have been doing a hot meal service, started at about 2,000 meals per day. We are today at almost 14,000 meals being served every day to the displaced population. We're focusing on those 15,000 that were recently displaced as a result of the violence last week. But we know we need to do more. There are probably more than 100,000 IDPs on site in Port-au-Prince at present.
Now in Brazil, the police have arrested a gunman who hijacked a public bus and held 17 people hostage in Rio de Janeiro. Police and emergency crew arrived at the Novo Rio bus station to carry out investigation and evacuate the injured. According to a spokesperson, Colonel Marco Andrade, 17 hostages were held in the bus and 2 people were confirmed injured, one of whom sustained gunshots. Officials say the unidentified suspect surrendered to police approximately 3 hours after the holding of the captives. Activities at the bus station were suspended by police following the arrest. Back home in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has directed the opening of Nigeria's land and air borders with the Republic of Niger and lifting of other sanctions against the country with immediate effect. A statement by the special advisor to the president on media and publicity states the directive is in compliance with the decision of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government at its extraordinary summit on February 24 this year. ECOWAS leaders had agreed to lift economic sanctions against the Republic of Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. And by this directive, the following sanctions are to be lifted immediately: a closure of land and air borders between Nigeria and Niger Republic, as well as ECOWAS no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger Republic, suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between Nigeria and Niger, as well as the freeze of all service transactions, including utility services and electricity to Niger Republic, freeze of assets of the Republic of Niger in ECOWAS central banks, and freeze of assets of the Republic of Niger, state enterprises and parastatals in commercial banks. The suspension of Niger from all financial assistance and transactions with all financial institutions, particularly EBID and BOAD. Travel bans on government officials and their family members. President Tinubu has already approved the lifting of financial and economic sanctions against the Republic of Guinea. A powerful gas explosion has rocked a restaurant in China's city of Yanjiao. The devastating blast left at least 2 people dead, 26 others injured in the early hours of today. Officials report a gas leak was behind the explosion and affected areas will be temporarily restricted for traffic and rescue operation. Fire services reported that 36 vehicles and 154 rescue teams were delivered to the site. Last June, a massive explosion occurred in Yinchuan, northwestern Ningxia region, killing 31 people. That incident was reported as one of the largest blasts in China. A small Japanese space rocket exploded shortly after its inaugural launch today in a blow to Tokyo Space One's attempt to become the first local company to put a satellite into orbit. The 18-meter four-stage solid fuel rocket called Kairos exploded into pieces seconds after liftoff in the mountains of Key Peninsula, Wakayama. According to Space One statements, the launch of the first Kairos rocket was executed, but measures were taken to abort the flight, and that the launch was highly automated and required only about a dozen staff at the ground control center. While there was immediate indication of the cause of the explosion, Space One said it was investigating. Initially, the launch of this rocket was scheduled for Saturday, but was postponed after the ship entered the nearby restricted sea area. Welcome back. It's Watching the World today on Channels Television. 3 Egyptian Coptic monks have been killed inside a monastery in South Africa. A statement put out by the South African Archdiocese of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Father Takla Musa, speaking on behalf of the group, says that the 3 monks were brutally murdered on Tuesday. They were killed at the St. Mark and St. Samuel, the Confessor Monastery, located in Cullinan, a small town 30 kilometers east of the capital, Pretoria. An Egyptian member of the church has been arrested as a possible suspect. The murder has the entire Coptic Orthodox community in South Africa and beyond in shock. Archbishop Angelos of the Coptic Orthodox Church in London described it as saddening and shocking. 4 people have died, 1 person injured as Storm Filipo hit southern Mozambique's Inhambane province. Roofs were ripped off schools and residential homes. In the tourist area of Tofo and Bara, the waves destroyed several boats, while in some areas, those roads were inaccessible. Local authorities say the storm has disrupted electricity supply and communication lines. Storm Filipo is still battering the province with intermittent rain and gusty winds. Its effects are already being felt in the capital, Maputo, and areas surrounding. Somalian refugees say they're struggling with conditions in the UNHCR's Dadaab camp. Somalia has gone through a succession of civil wars for over 30 years now. It's led to thousands of people leaving the country searching for a better life. Many of them have fled their country, where the Somalian armed forces and government have been fighting against militant groups, most prominently the Al-Shabaab.
Refugees from Somalia shared their struggle with poor living conditions at the Dadaab United Nations Refugee Agency UNHCR camp situated in Garissa in eastern Kenya. Footage captures the daily life of refugees at the camp, where residents experience a lack of food, education and other essentials. Abubakar Ado is a refugee who had been staying in Dadaab refugee camp since 2012.
I came here 2012, in the year 2012. While I was young, I started to pursue my education from primary to secondary. I have been all over that time here in the Dadaab refugee camp. The life here in the Dadaab refugee camp is very much complex. Although that anyone that who have dream and have ambition can stay, but when it comes to life, the environment is very harsh. When it comes to climate, when it comes to daily bread, like what we call the food that the refugees are given. So life is very hard here. But why we are here in the refugee camp is some of them is like the clean water that we have, and also the bees, the bees that we have here in northeastern Kenya.
He laments the perceived lack of governance and oversight at the camp.
I am from a place called Sako, mainly controlled by the Al-Shabaab. Those people, they have not seen government since Yad Barre. So you can imagine at that, people who have not seen government in the last 40 years, meaning that there were no even basic education. There's no human right. People cannot say this, whatever they want to say. So there are a lot of problems, meaning they have even forgotten about the idea of government.
Another camp resident, Ahede Hassan Abdi, agrees it is a challenge to secure the necessary food and shelter.
Life here at the camp is very difficult. Getting enough food is almost impossible. We only get 2 kilograms of sorghum and lentils every 2 weeks. The housing too is deplorable. We have been forced to use blankets for walls and roofing just to get by.
Despite the conditions, Ahede vows not to return to Somalia during the ongoing conflict, as in the refugee camp, her 4 children would at least feel safe.
Somalia is still undergoing the same struggles that made us flee the country. Still in here, we're still facing the same problem. We have been living here for 27 years. We surely feel safe, but we suffer from the lack of food and shortage of washrooms.
The Dadaab refugee camp is home to almost 400,000 refugees, with a third of them registered by the UNHCR and the rest unregistered. The complex comprises of 3 camps, namely Dagahale, Ifo, and Hagadera. According to the UNHCR, 96% of the population is from Somalia, most of them fleeing famine and war in the country, with the remaining refugees being from South Sudan, DR Congo, and Ethiopia.
Well, how often do you see it happening? One dog doing good in the city of Santiago. We know that a dog has been man's best friend for decades now, but let's say that Sam is following in the footsteps of his ancestors. Here's a hero of the story, a border collie dog who joins his owner to collect hundreds of plastic bottles, masks and food packs every day. Yes, every day. You may have seen Sam if you were living in Santiago, and Chiang, his owner, running and collecting dozens of plastic bottles which they later throw away into trash bins across the city. Sam has reportedly collected almost 12,000 recycled bottles and cans since the start of the journey on San Cristobal Hill. And off he goes again. Well, Sam seems rather enthusiastic. I'm sure he's motivating his owner. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.